Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Multipolar Report. I hope that everyone had a fantastic weekend. And let's get started with covering some of the events that have transpired since my last post, roughly 3 days ago. The Ukrainians on the 29th, during the day, launched an attack on Crimea, where they targeted the naval assets and logistics hubs of the Russian armed forces there. The Russians claimed that the Ukrainians utilized roughly 30 drones at one point and tried to swarm the Russians. And of those 30, all of them were destroyed with the exception of two, where two of the enemy drones managed to destroy an oil depot. Of the 30, four of them peeled off, two were destroyed, while two ended up hitting part of the depot, which ended up destroying four oil tanks. And it's to be determined the damage on the other oil tanks as well. These oil tanks supply the Black Sea Fleet with the needed oil to operate in that region. Additionally, any Russian forces that maybe have their logistics running through Crimea would also be siphoning off some of this oil. And the Russians responded very quickly, where within 12 hours, the Russians launched their missile attack on the city of Pavlograd. And as you can see by the image, it's a very large explosion, which would have which was speculated as to what was hit by the Russians. And it appears that the two theories were, one, it could have been a chemical plant, or it's hit a pure arms depot. Based on the explosion, it's speculated that it was a arms depot for S-300 or air defense missile systems, because the way that you have the flares running off the sides. Still waiting on more information from that. However, it does lean more towards the theory of hitting a massive arms depot or and train hub for the Ukrainians, which is the Russians' attempts to slow down and minimize the effectiveness of any Ukrainian combination of forces, and limit the degree of which that the Ukrainians can launch their offensive, which is impending according to Western sources, and it will happen very soon this month, but there's also some people reporting that it may be early summertime. Additionally, the Russians conducted a missile strike last night, where the Ukrainians claimed that of the 18 cruise missiles launched, 15 of them were destroyed. Initial reporting on this matter had that the entire strategic bomber fleet of Russia took off from Engels Air Force Base, which was about 10 bombers, and that it was much more eerie during that period because it was speculated that could be hundreds of missiles being launched, because at the same time you had naval attachments of the Russian armed forces in the Black Sea, which could also contribute to more caliber missile launches. But right now, there's very little footage online to show any real devastation by the Russians in this regard. And it appears that the reports of there being 10 or even 18 bombers attacking Ukraine was at the very least exaggerated, and potentially the Russians launched these attacks and they thought that there would be a less Ukrainian air defense capabilities on the ground, and because there was that initial success from the air defense, then they called off the rest of the attacks and want to do more damage to the Ukrainian air defense systems. But we still have to wait for a lot more information on that story. Additionally, here's some photos of the attack in Pavlograd, which was posted by Russians with Attitude. As you can see, the explosion is absolutely massive, and the effects of this, if this is a air defense depot where they had just stored a large amount of S-300 batteries and missiles, would be absolutely devastating for the Ukrainians. As we discussed in the last post, they're already getting targeted with their S-300 air defense systems, and if they continue to lose them at this exceptional rate, then those problems articulated in the Pentagon papers stating that the Ukrainians are already running out of air defense missiles is going to be going parabolic. And this just spells trouble for the Ukrainians in any capacity for an upcoming offensive, where if the Russians want to slow them down, they can do what they've been doing, such as targeting the railway stations, targeting the energy grid, or targeting the fuel depots. And there's too many holes that are bleeding for the Ukrainians where they can't plug all of them, and as they leave a hole open, the water begins to come in faster and faster. Additionally, we have some economic news. First Republic Bank, which is the second largest bank to ever go under, has officially gone under in the United States, and the government seized the First Republic Bank and they have sold it to JP Morgan. And this is the second largest bank to ever go under in the United States, and this is only a few months after Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank failed in March. First Republic in the last quarter, lost $102 billion in deposits, which is more than, according to New York Times, more than half of the $176 billion it held at the end of last year. Last week alone, the stocks plummeted, where they dropped 75%. And today, it was officially announced that JP Morgan is acquiring First Republic Bank, and this is coming under a lot of scrutiny because the government seized it, sold it to JP Morgan. So it's feeding into that theory that there is that too big to fail class of banks, and you have a lot of these, let's just say, community banks, even that go under, get eaten by a bigger fish, in this case JP Morgan, and then JP Morgan gets guaranteed by the federal government to take these assets under their books or liabilities. And if anything happens to JP Morgan, the government has to support them, and thus it creates a banking oligarchy in the United States if we're not already there. Additionally, Bloomberg released this great article which discusses the recession probabilities worldwide in 2023. As you can see, the Western countries are the highest at risk for a recession, and the global South, as has been stated by Russia, or as has been called by Russia and other countries, is one of the least likely to have a global economic recession, or to have a economic recession. And the United Kingdom is at 75%, Germany 60%, United States 65%. This, I think it's fair to say, was not the idea going into the sanction regime. Russia has a 37.5% chance of recession, and the UK is again at 75%, so double. This is the opposite of what was stated to be the effects of sanctioning the Russian economy, and certainly things can change very, very quickly. Again, this is where the collective West viewed Russia would be at this moment in time, if not already there. And as we know, the Russian economy right now is increasing, or at least projected to grow by 2%, I believe, this year. And now we have major contraction throughout the Western countries. And as highlighted just by the complete financial meltdown that's happening in the United States right now, with the second largest bank by assets failed in the U.S. history. In Switzerland, you had the largest bank failure, where Credit Suisse went under. And just a couple months ago, we had Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank go under. So it seems to be certainly... it's like that Ernest Hemingway quote where you go into debt, or you find out that you're in debt gradually and then suddenly, and that just kind of seems to be the case with the collective Western economies, where gradually they're going under and then suddenly. Plus, you have Elon Musk saying that raising interest rates anymore will just double or quadruple the pain that the U.S. economy is going to be feeling, because we're already in a recession and the economic indicators that the Federal Reserve utilizes is just lagging behind. And he says this coming off the back of the interview, or the prank interview, with Jerome Powell, where Jerome Powell said that there's going to be at least another 2 interest rate hikes, 2 guaranteed interest rate hikes, both at 0.25%, so up to 50%, up to 0.5% interest rate hikes, which is going to be applying even more pressure onto the banks and also onto the international financial partners, because it's because if we raise interest rates, it can increase the value of the dollar, which if it increases the value of the dollar, then it drives up the costs. It drives up the U.S. trading partners' costs, because they would have to pay more to be able to get access to more dollars. So we also have some European international news. Erdogan claims that the Turkish forces have neutralized the IS chief in Syria. I'm well aware about what the acronym means, yet for YouTube algorithmic purposes, I'll just stick with the IS. And the code name for him was, the person that was neutralized was Abu Hussein al-Qurashiri. The group in question has been almost every few months, it seems like another leader gets neutralized. So it's more or less serving as a great political pawn for whoever manages to take out the next, whoever is up for to accept the title of chief for that group. And we saw it with Joe Biden, and now we see it with Turkey, where he's certainly going to be platforming off of his strong leadership against terrorism, Erdogan, during his election period. And as we can see, Turkey's president, after his illness a few days ago, which was a stomach bug, which again was conflicting reports, where it was said that it was a heart attack, but it actually just turned out to be a stomach bug. He's back on the campaign trail, which is 14 days prior to the election, and he was in the city of Izmir, which I'm not up to date on my Turkish politics, but according to the BBC, is an opposition stronghold. And he held for a 40-minute speech, which was a rock and roll speech. And he says that he was raising the specter of terrorism in the sense that he will protect them, he will deliver growth for Turkey, and ultimately that he's stronger than ever and that people need to stick by him. So with Erdogan, it looks like he is really turning on the jets for these last 14 days and going into this realm of greater uncertainty. It does appear that, in my opinion, that he most likely will be able to secure victory, just because on the geopolitical front, he's not so hell-bent in with the collective West agenda to just hurt Russia for hurting Russian purposes, even if you hurt yourself. And on top of that, he has a kind of independent flair to himself as a strongman and as somebody that can lead him through a period of crisis. So, additionally, we have for the May Day pension protests, it is reported that the union leaders in France, which are organizing a protest for today, May the 1st, expect up to 1 million people to attend this rally, and they want to protest the increase in the pension retirement age from which Macron made possible through executive order or edict, and he increased it from 62 years old in order to retire up to 64. And these protests, in typical French fashion, are massive and even violent, unfortunately, where there are videos online showing French police officers getting firebombed or getting hit with Molotov cocktails, and on top of that, the French police then charging down protesters. So there will be unfortunate videos coming out of violence through these protests, but again, it just shows the underlying precarious situation throughout Europe, political situation. And you have Macron, which is at an all-time low for his popularity. And this is posted as of April 6th, whereas on April, more up to date on April 24th through Politico as well, found him to actually be at 28% approval now and be at 72% disapproval, which is the greatest it's ever been. In July last year, there was the election where between Macron and Le Pen, where Macron, at around July last year, he was at 60% disapproval. Today, he's at 72%. And that 12-point increase in less than a year is something that a lot of Western leaders are going to have to be addressing, because as we discussed, the economic outlook is only going to become more precarious, and you're going to have, in my opinion, a lot more unrest where people during a period of good times can accept the liberal Goldilocks dream, the liberal vision crusade, where we have to show austerity and we have to know that things will get bad, but they won't get that bad. It will be worse for the opponent. And they can accept those things up to a point where then it starts to where it starts to become unbearable for the people living through it. And if, again, according to Bloomberg, these things can change, as I say, if it gets as bad as it's speculated to get, where you have the largest financial banks melting down, and given the fact that the Western economies are, for the most part, financialized economies, you could have real unrest where people are facing the reality of the situation, and they recognize that the leaders are refusing reality. And I mean that in the sense that you have liberal crusades, for example, in Germany, where they say that there's going to be more austerity, there's going to have to be more cuts because we have to not import Russian natural gas or oil. Okay. But at the same time, they close all their nuclear reactors. And I think that disconnect between the elite and the people, in that case Germany, is going to have major ramifications on the social cohesion. And we could certainly see much more protests of the likes that we see with France, if the economic situation in the West continues to deteriorate, at least at the rate that it's currently deteriorating, as shown with First Republic Bank. So that is all I have for the news going on throughout the world today. Again, not really too much craziness. It's more or less the quiet before the storm, honestly, with the speculated Ukrainian counter-offensive. And we have to wait and see on the effectiveness of it. It's, from what I've seen, it's anticipated that they'll do quite well in the initial stages. But once they start to hit the Russian defense in depth, we could see it become much more volatile for both sides. Where if the attacking side gets essentially punched in the nose, it could turn into a rout, and you lose a lot of your combat capability, especially if you've just been accumulating it for the past 6 months. Meanwhile, the Russians, if they get in a position where they're actually at risk of losing Crimea, it becomes a very dangerous situation where they view Crimea as their most important. I think they'd rather lose Belgorod than they would rather lose Crimea. So that's and going forward, we're going to have to just wait and see for when this offensive is supposed to happen. Again, it's speculated that it's been postponed, hasn't been postponed. It's about to happen any day now, like the BBC said, where they said that it's the city of Dnipro Pavlograd was hit ahead of a much anticipated counteroffensive. So they believe that it's coming imminently. We'll see. We shall see. We'll see if these Russian strikes did anything to subvert or to slow down the accumulation of forces, and and now, or if the destruction of air defense systems also slowed it down. But that is all I have. I will upload, or I will keep you guys in the know for what happens over these next couple of days when I upload again on Wednesday or Thursday. But I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of my content, make sure to subscribe as well. And I hope you guys all have a good one, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye-bye.